For a limited time, you can finally get your hands on one of Gran Turismo's most legendary cars of all time. Of course, I'm talking about the Suzuki Escudo Pikes Peak, which has finally returned to Gran Turismo 7. Not only is it still one of the best grinding cars in the entire game and continues the trend of massively glitched builds, it's also one of the coolest vehicles to ever feature in the franchise. Even in 2024, the Escudo Pikes Peak continues to be one of the most broken cars to feature in almost any Gran Turismo game. Even in GT7, you're still able to make a ton of credits with this thing, and also some of the most weird and wacky builds. However, a word of warning: if you ever decide to take this thing out on track at night, you're probably going to be in for a surprise, as no, it does not feature headlights whatsoever. However, before we get into the main meat of this video and take a look at the updated Escudo Pikes Peak, please leave a like, subscribe and turn those notifications on so you don't miss an upload. So the Escudo Pikes Peak returns for a very fair price of 1.7 million credits. Whilst to some players that might seem like quite a bit, within around about 45 minutes of your time you can pretty much earn the entire thing back. But what's so special about the Escudo Pikes Peak? Well, let's dive into the stats themselves. It has a PP rating of 789.24, displacement of 2493cc, 4-wheel drive, 981 brake horsepower and weighs only 800 kilograms, and of course is turbocharged. One of the most notable features is the insane turbo lag this thing has. So let's talk about the Escudo Pikes Peak, as it's the first real time it's returned since update 1.49 changed the entire physics of the game. So when it comes to Gran Turismo 7, I like to call this car a survivor. What I mean by that is when it comes to the entire physics overhaul and the PP changes, this thing managed to get through it all with only a relatively minor nerf, getting slower by a matter of seconds rather than minutes. Overall, this still remains as one of the most broken and beautifully fun cars in the entirety of GT7. Whether you want to go for wheelie builds, muddy builds, or just take a rocket ship around on some of the rally tracks in game, you can pretty much do it all. It's one of the most versatile and most famous Gran Turismo vehicles of all time. Just a word of warning though, when it comes to Gran Turismo 7, if you're a relatively new player, you might want to just be a little bit cautious at first. This is an insanely lightweight and insanely powerful 4-wheel drive rocket ship. It can be a little bit janky to say the least, and definitely requires some fine tuning to get the best out of this car depending on which track and what surface you take it on. It's very capable on both dirt and road, so really just feel free to play around with this thing. It definitely has a specific learning curve to it. Not only that, it does feature insane turbo lag. It's one of the famous cars when it comes to GT7 to feature an insane amount of turbo lag, but once it does kick in, boy, you're gonna know about it. This thing will accelerate and suck your face off like there is no tomorrow, so just be aware of that. And definitely after update 1.49, one of the main things I did notice about the Escudo is the fact that it's a little bit sketchy under the brakes. It really will require you to play around with the brake bias as well as your actual torque differential. Again, it's all about just getting things fine-tuned with this car, and it's probably one of the most exhilarating and perfect experiences in the entire game. But again, not really the most beginner friendly car. However, if you do manage to wrap your head around this thing, you're in for an absolute treat. Now in terms of the car itself, I think we all know it's one of the most iconic vehicles to ever feature in the Gran Turismo franchise, going all the way back to Gran Turismo 2, where it was a massive standout to rocket down Pikes Peak itself. Through almost every single iteration of the Gran Turismo franchise, there has been ways to break the Suzuki Escudo, whether that was driving it at 3,000 miles per hour, popping wheelies, or launching it out of bounds in terms of some of the tracks. This car has basically been through it all ever since its Gran Turismo 2 introduction. Since then, it's always been a firm fan favourite with its ridiculous aero, insane speed and 4-wheel drive, as well as that jankiness just giving it a ton of personality. And it's no different when it comes to Gran Turismo 7. Now in terms of this vehicle you're seeing here, this is fully standard. So let's see where it manages to rank on our lap time leaderboard. As you can see, so far out of the cars we've tested, it comes in second 2nd place, running the Racing Hard compound, a time of 6 minute 18.960 around the Nordschleife. That puts it overall in P2 on our leaderboard, which is a fairly quick time by almost a minute to some of the road cars in game, only really getting beaten by the Group 1 race car, the Genesis Grand Racer. However, where you can really make this thing an absolute missile is by throwing all of the upgrades on it and coupling it with racing soft tyres. This thing becomes an absolute menace at that point, whilst again it does definitely require some fine tuning, which unfortunately I can't do for my car reviews. It really is an absolutely mind-bending experience. Once that turbocharger kicks in, especially with those upgrades on, this thing is even faster. The acceleration on a car that is coming upwards of almost 30 years old is absolutely incredible. To think that Suzuki actually made this thing blows my mind, and again, although it's kind of dated and I guess in a sense it's kind of showing that these days, it really is a pretty impressive package overall. The V6 Escudo Pikes Peak will always remain as one of my firm fan favourites, and it'll also remain as one of the most broken cars in Gran Turismo franchise history, and I absolutely love it for that. So whether you want to go ahead and grind a bunch of credits, pop wheelies, or just absolutely throw this thing about for hours on end, this is the ultimate package in Gran Turismo 7. So when it comes to its fully upgraded time, the Suzuki V6 Escudo Pikes Peak Special from 1998 sits in P2. That's a seriously impressive time with a 1 minute 52.903. Considering the sheer amount of ridiculous power in this car, how uncontrollable it can be without fine tuning, and just the fact that it features a ton of turbo lag, that's a pretty impressive time. However, I am honestly known on this channel for giving Polyphony a pretty hard time, and I guess I just want to go into this segment to just give them credit where credit is due. Although GT7 was getting a lot of stick at the time and honestly was in a much worse place than where it currently is, Polyphony did manage pretty quickly to bring out the Suzuki Escudo Pikes Peak in May of 2022, just a couple of months after launch, and ever since then this just seems to be the one single car that survives every single physics change, every single update, to remain as broken, as ridiculous and fun as possible. And honestly, I have to give props to Polyphony for that one. They've never really got around to actually butchering this car like we do see with some of the other vehicles. Honestly, I kind of feel like them as a developer are pretty big fans of this legendary car and understand what it means to the Gran Turismo franchise to have the Pikes Peak there. So do you know what? I guess for once, props to Kaz and Polyphony for keeping this car as ridiculous and janky as it's ever been, but also having a side to it that makes it one of the best and most useful cars in game. So do you know what? Well done to them. So there we go, the Suzuki Escudo Pikes Peak still remains as one of the best Gran Turismo 7 cars in history, and honestly it still remains as one of the best cars in the franchise's history as well. I have zero complaints when it comes to this thing. It's an absolute missile. I spent hundreds of hours just having fun with this thing, grinding money with this thing, and building many different versions of it. If you loved it in the previous games, you'll absolutely love it now, and if you loved it post update 1.49, it's still the same absolute missile that it's always been. Anyway, a massive thank you to all of my channel members for your continued support, and a massive thank you to you guys watching at home today. I hope you have a fantastic rest of your weekend. Take care guys, peace.